Before creating my magazine, I encountered a serious amount of research and planning to ensure I knew exactly what the conventions of a professional music magazine were. My main achievement was to ensure I used the perfect conventions associated with my target audience and my music genre of dance. Firstly, I started by creating a plan of what essential aspects of research I needed to explore. Starting with the front cover, the first aspect of creating my magazine was the title masthead. I started by brainstorming names. I had a very long list of potential names I wanted to use. I then asked for feedback on what names my peers most liked and thought that would best suit my magazine. I whittled it down to 4 final names. Before I settled with either one of these, I wanted to ensure I'd researched into each one to ensure that I was completely happy with my choice. I thought the best way to investigate more was to look for synonyms of each word to see if there was any alternatives I really liked. From my further research, none of the supplied alternatives were really appropriate or what I thought better than my selection already. Therefore, instead of changing the words, I decided to play with graphical elements. I started by looking at other magazines within the music industry. This included Mixmag, NME, Billboard and Q. I've noticed that a lot of the magazines I researched used the masthead to look like a logo as well as the title. For example, NME is an abbreviation for New Musical Express. They have abbreviated their title to enable that their masthead looks like a logo as well. Someone who does something similar is Q Magazine. They also have a simple one-lettered title enabling both masthead and logo again. As well as making my title look like a logo, many magazines include graphical elements or some sort of design. For example, Billboard has coloured in the B, O, A and D of their title with block bold colours. Similarly, Mixmag also includes graphical elements of turning the I in mix to a circular pattern. However, I personally prefer a basic bold title. Examples of this are NME and Vibe. They both have basic, bold, striking titles. I feel this is the best way to catch the audience attention and therefore I'm going to try and achieve this look. I decided I was going to use basic bold fonts with a colour scheme of red and white. Many magazines use these colours as they are very bold and eye-catching. Therefore, I've selected them to be my chosen colour scheme. I started with looking at graphical elements by changing the A in play to a play symbol, changing the E in volume to a speaker and making the whole of sync uppercase. After looking at different fonts I could use, using dafont.com was the best way for me. I decided that Vibe was definitely not the name choice I wanted. After playing with different fonts, it really wasn't the look I was trying to achieve. I then asked people what they preferred out of my 3 final options. The feedback I received was very controversial. Some people preferred play due to its graphical elements, whereas others preferred sync and volume for their uniqueness and individuality. From the feedback I received, the most positive came from play. However, after I trialled the names against possible front page photos in Photoshop, I realised that sync was in fact the most visually pleasing. Therefore, I have concluded to sync as my final magazine name. Sync I felt was the best choice as all its alternative links relate back to music. It is also a very universal relation to music, attracting a wider audience. The next aspect I needed to focus on was my images. I researched many images for magazines within my genre of dance. I wanted to see what type of models they used, what clothing, background and lighting was used. This way I could ensure that my magazine would be able to stand out from the crowd but still fit in with the other magazines within my genre. After looking over all the front pages of music magazines within my genre, I noticed that clothing is very important to convey. If you get the clothing wrong, people may not assume or understand the link to my chosen genre. Therefore, I ensured that my clothing was current and on trend to ensure that my audience think my magazine is. My target audience is focused around chavers and mainstreamers, therefore fashion is very important to them. I had to ensure that my clothing choice was chosen with my audience in mind. Also, there is many other important factors such as pose, eye contact and positioning. Majority of the time, eye contact is direct and essential to a good front cover. Also, the pose and positioning is very striking and contemporary, catching the audience eyes. Therefore, from all my research, I concluded to using a plain background with very little going on in the picture. I used a very trendy model and clothing that was up to date, and ensured my model had the correct hair and makeup for my target audience. I used very strong poses with direct eye contact, ensuring more connection with the audience. I did this so that my target audience would be able to relate with my magazine, making them more interested in it. I researched several layouts to get inspiration for how I'd like my cover to look. I found three main aspects of layout: either having a picture on the left with cover lines down the right, either having the picture right orientated with cover lines down the left, or having the image centre orientated with cover lines either side. Personally for me, having the image centre orientated with cover lines either side was the best option. I also need to decide where I wanted to place my masthead. To match the centre orientated image, I decided to locate my masthead in the same place, making it central to the page. I then had to decide whether I wanted the masthead behind or in front of the image. I researched other magazines to see what majority of the industry do, but it was very optional on the issue of the magazine itself. Therefore, in my own circumstances, it made more sense to put the masthead in front of the image and the model, as the model would cover up too much of the title, making it unreadable. After sorting out my image and layout, it was pretty simple, just filling in the cover lines along the sides. I made all text orientated to the edge of the page, ensuring my magazine was looking professional, ensuring I had created a sleek look. I also decided on a red and white colour scheme, which my inspiration came from this issue of NME with Cheryl Cole. Lastly, to ensure my magazine looks professional as possible, I included a barcode and QR code that would link my magazine to my magazine's website. I picked red and white as my colour scheme as they're very universal colours. If I used pink or blue, the magazine would be associated with genders, female and male. Therefore, by using red, I'm not limiting my target audience. I then moved on to my contents page. I had to ensure that this worked with my front page, ensuring I had a unified house style. Firstly, I researched on average how many columns a contents page had. Majority of the time, this came out as 3. Therefore, with the number of columns I was going to use sorted, I then researched layout designs. I came across many different layouts. NME, Mojo and Q all have a lot of smaller images spread across the page with content surrounding it. However, I feel like all of these contents pages are too image heavy and can be a little overwhelming. Mixmag contents stuck out the most to me, having one large image as the focus of the page, followed by content surrounding it. I felt this was the best layout design as it caught people's eyes by being unique and striking. It helped as it did not overload people with too much information, but gave enough to keep readers interested. Despite liking this, I feel like I needed 1 or 2 more images to give my audience and readers more of an insight into my magazine and what was included inside. With my layout decided, I simply just had to insert the content text and then a simple bold contents title. Lastly, I had to create my double page spreads. Firstly, I researched how many pages on average an article took up. The most common amount of pages used was 2. Therefore, I decided to make 2 double page spreads for my articles spread across them both. I firstly researched how most double page spread articles were laid out. The most common layout design was having one main image covering both pages as a title or an introduction page. I was heavily inspired by the design layout and decided that this was the best idea for me to use. I was also very inspired by having a double page spread that was dominated by an image on one side and with written content on the other. This seemed to be a very common and popular way of presenting double page spread articles. Therefore, these are the 2 designs I concluded to use in. I also noticed that during my research, most if not all double page spread articles have a pull quote throughout. I also decided to include a pull quote, hooking in the reader even more. These are my final double page spreads. All of my decisions during the creation of my project all came to be quite easy due to the large extent of research and planning I carried out before starting. I'm very pleased with my overall magazine and I believe I achieved the goals I set out to.